definitely not the smartest person in the world at anything. Curiosity it's important, especially because there's a lot of things that I do not know about. But being an expert in something, it's getting more and more complicated as the world expands in complexity. Whatever you do, if you do not have curiosity, you may have a skill set that may be repeatable, but I think a curious individual can go much, much farther, right? And to link it back with being an investor, I'm talking to founders every week. In any case, I'm definitely talking with someone that knows more than.
How do you use like curiosity yourself as an investor as an advantage, like when you're dealing with entrepreneurs and just in terms of like how you do your day to day?
You can't replace part of the brain. Like you
treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
The State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a good friend of mine and a guest, Diego Serrano, who is an investor in the MedTech space, who's now part of a really interesting group called Sofina. I'll let him explain what they do, just to sort of alleviate him from everything. Everything that he's going to discuss in no way, shape, or form is connected to or reflects the positions or opinions of his employer, which is Sofina. And now that that's out of the way, let's just get into it and have a lot of fun. So we're going to talk a lot about not just investing, but a lot of, how Diego and I think about when it comes to like markets and evaluating companies and everything. We actually got connected through, like I usually do with most of my great friends, is through LSI. We've had like a few conversations and really the vibes are always good, and so, I just told him, I was like, look, like, I think you just need to come on the show and we need to hang out and get into a deeper conversation. We should just record it too. So that's what this is going to be. So Diego, thanks for joining the show. Maybe before we dive into like just sort of all the topics we want to cover, maybe give everybody a background, like first your background, how'd you get started in this industry? And then of course, like a little bit about Sofina, if you'd like to share.
Yes, sure. Of course. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm a bit nervous. It's only the second time I record a podcast, and the first time was with you as well.
But right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the first time we had all kinds of technical issues, but like it's all right. This was going to be the better one.
Yeah, no, but for sure. So, just a second about me. I started my career in traditional M&A advisory. At that point in time, I was not directly involved in healthcare, but across a variety of industries, real estate, energy, traditional financial services. And then at some point, I decided that I was very interested in entrepreneurship. My family, they own a couple of retail stores, and I thought, maybe it would be great to bring this online selling platform to their retail store. And this was, by the way, much before Uber Eats and the grocery stores and such, but it was not the right time, either for the industry or for myself. Although through that, I did discover what venture capital was, and I started becoming very, very interested in it. A couple or a year later, more or less, I had the good chance of meeting someone that had a investment firm, but he was co-managing it with another partner from Spain. They were based between Spain and Geneva. It was called Aquilia Partners, and I started working with them. And they had a very strong network within Israel because they had backed this healthcare company called Amwell. And so at the time, they were doing a lot of MedTech, medical devices, and that's kind of how it all started. Spent a couple of years at Aquilia. It was a great time, still have a great relationship with the partners there. But decided I wanted to move a little bit more into the later stage, larger deals. And so that's how it all comes together to today, that I'm part of the Sofina group. By the way, I can say that throughout my time at Aquilia, I dedicated a lot of time with our portfolio companies, which were all mostly in the medical device space. One of them, Body Vision Medical. Yeah. And so, yes, after Body Vision, I decided that what I wanted to do next is continuing in this industry, but maybe looking at commercial stage companies. And thus I was lucky enough to to get to know Sofina and to find a way to work together and now work for the firm.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I think there's definitely a very interesting dynamic as an investor between when you're looking at, let's say, PowerPoint companies being like early stage that are pre-revenue, and then like spreadsheet companies, which are, they're going to have like their spreadsheet companies, right? Because they're generating revenue and everything, right? Which one do you think is more difficult to evaluate?
Well, I think all of them are difficult to evaluate, and
they're all difficult.
Yes,
but which one? Let me bias you a little bit. Here's my take. I think on the spreadsheet company, what's difficult is like determining like, okay, does the size of this market, is it really that size, and can this company continue to scale and grow its revenue consistently, like up and to the right? I think that early stage PowerPoint companies is definitely more of an art and intuition, because like there's so many more variables that you're dealing with that like you don't know. That's how I've always felt. I don't know.
I fully agree with you, and in fact, I'll give you another anecdote of why I actually wanted to move into later stage companies, which maybe gives you a bit of the direct response to that. I felt that at the early stages, the learning cycles as an investor are very, very slow. So in the sense that I may invest today or tomorrow in a pro-revenue clinical stage company, and it's going to take me many, many years to see if I made the right or the wrong decision. And that it's not simply based on whether the company gets FDA approval or MDR, EU MDR approval. It's about where does the company go. So it can take many, many years. The second is that I believe, again, there's a higher luck component the earlier you go in the history of a company. It's not to say that very early stage investors are lucky when things go right. I mean, they are amazing investors with very long track records. But me, myself, I felt more comfortable or more interested now in the later stages of a company where I feel like I have more data to make whichever decision I end up making.
And actually provide, like, I think the other side of it is provide more tactical guidance and help the company, right? Whether it's like hiring or like certain approaches to sales and marketing and stuff. I think for me over at MarketCraft, a lot of the companies we deal with are early stage in the sense they're pre-FDA, pre-commercial. We have also revenue generating companies. I like the revenue generating companies because they still have the same obstacles that they're solving for, like attracting investors, getting from strategics, but then you add to that they're in the market. And so it sort of adds a new set of problems that you can solve for. That's a little bit more interesting. But yeah, I do tend to agree. I think if you talk to like most investors, like the Paul Grahams of the world and everything, I think they want to value their skill set more on the early stage side, because that's where you can't deploy like a set of analysts at such, because you don't have like tangible like numbers to work with. And so I think a lot of it is essentially on market sizing, intuition. What's interesting, by the way, something I didn't realize, a friend of mine, Graham Taylor, who's an investor over at a fund called Naya, he told me this, and I didn't realize this, that the best investors as a whole are non-operators. And so I used to always think that the investors who used to be operators themselves are really good investors because they're able to. And his thing was like, one of his things about non-operators, people who like weren't like a CEO or a VP of marketing or something, is that because you're a non-operator, you come to everything with a fresh set of eyes, and there's sort of, you don't have any biases that you have.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes, I definitely don't have the strong view that an investor must have been an operator for many years to do a good job as an investor. Maybe, if an investor has been an operator before, he has an easier way to understand or empathize with founders and with management teams, that for sure. But I don't think being a good operator or having been an operator makes you a better investor. And by the way, I also don't think that an investor, just because of the fact that they've seen from the top bunch of different companies, that would make them a great operator. I think that the skill set is completely different. And it is true that once you've been an operator, I guess that you tend to see or to try to match the patterns that you've seen as an operator to when you're being an investor. It is very important to keep an open mind as an investor and to realize that, because something has not worked in an industry or in a company until now, it doesn't matter that, there's not going to be a great team out there that is going to be able to do things and to really crack that problem. I mean, even in the healthcare industry, right, there's many things, there's many huge, massive problems that a lot of startups are trying to disrupt. And there's hundreds of startups that have failed at many given problems, right? And still, this is, every single year, new startups working on the same issue will be coming up, but there will come a time where the timing is right, the team is right, and and that one company may be able to crack the problem that many others have tried to crack in the past. So, I mean, I've prolonged my answer a bit, but it is to tell you that I think that investor and operator are very different skill sets. There can be great investors that could not be great operators. There can be great operators that could not be great investors. And as always, there's magic people that could be great operators and investors.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's interesting because we have a similar thing on the marketing side. So for me, something that our industry does often is that when they hire a head of sales or head of marketing, let's say it's a cardiology company, right? And so then I'll get asked by a CEO hey, can you recommend a head of marketing? We want somebody who's got 10 years of experience in cardiology. And I'm like, okay, I understand why that might be because, if you have that experience, you understand the market, the space, etc. At the same time, the problem with that on the commercial side is that you also come with all kinds of biases. I see this even more with sales, which if you hire a sales leader that comes specifically from that specialty, they come in with their own biases about who you need to sell to first and why and everything. And when you do that, I feel like most of the time your biases work against you than actually helping you, But again, the flip side of that is also when somebody says, I want more experience, you're wanting somebody who has stronger intuition about things. So there's this kind of two sides to that.
Well, I think, maybe what you're saying, and as I'm thinking about it, I'd say that someone that has done something before is less prone to making mistakes. It's probably also less prone to do things in an innovative way that, may be better than the status quo or the standard of care or the golden standard of care within that specific knowledge field, right? So I guess it depends a bit if you are investing or operating within a very stable market, or you're going into an innovative field for which, probably first, you cannot have done exactly the same if you're in an innovative field. You may have done something similar, but cannot be the same. So yes, I completely agree with you.
So on that note, something that you do that I really admire and I like, and I would love to see more. MedTech is interesting because it's kind of it's literally its own little universe, right? If you look at SaaS and some of the other industries, there's a little bit more public interest, and so they get exposure to a lot of different things. For better, for worse. But unless you're in med device or med tech, you literally don't know it. If I go down the street and I tell my neighbor about SaaS or software or AI, they'll be like, oh, I know what that. But if I say med tech or medical device, a lot of times they don't know what that is. So that being said, as a result, I feel like a lot of investors in our space are kind of private and to themselves and not as public. And I think one of the most important things as an investor is actually publicizing your thought process and how you're thinking about things ahead of time. And so something that you had, shared, you have a blog or newsletter, which I love the name, is Open Entropy. And you kind of talked about that, when you write, it sort of liberates this brain space and also humbles you. I'm wondering how has writing sort of allowed you to sort of vet out investment opportunities and just kind of sharpen your thinking?
Sure. So I write all the time. I just don't publish because I'm a little bit self-conscious, and
I'm going to change that. Now that we've become good friends, I'm putting a lot of pressure on you to do more of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really self-conscious. Maybe I'm being a bit too humble here, but I do think that good writing takes time, and and thoughts get refined. And what I was thinking 4 years ago, probably, if I were to read something that I wrote 4 years ago, I would feel like it was not the quality that I would have liked. But I do write all the time. As an investor, every time I'm thinking about a new opportunity, exploring a new thesis, I start writing my thoughts. And there's always you get to a point where you cannot write something else. Like a question pops up, and you ask yourself, okay, what should be the next line that I'm writing? And if I don't know, it's probably because I have some gaps in understanding. And then what is the action plan? How do I learn about this? And we have different resources, fortunately, at Sofina. So I can talk with a lot of people in the industry to try to solve that gap in knowledge that I have. But it's by writing that, you can start putting things in paper and actually realizing whether you have a deep understanding of whatever you're analyzing at the point in time or you're not. Because if you only play with your thoughts, it's very easy to create a narrative and to build conviction in something by the simple fact that, thought processing, it's a little bit less linear and you don't have all the bases covered. So I think that was the number one use of writing for myself.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me, but before there was even this term of influencers or creators on LinkedIn, over 10 years ago, I was on LinkedIn, and the way I started was writing long form articles every week. And I did that for 3 years. And I think that the important part about it is that it really forces you to clarify your thinking and support it. One of the now with LLMs like Gemini and ChatGPT, it's super helpful, right, in doing the research and everything. But now I think a lot of people anybody can write a book, anybody can write an article. So I think the ability to write something that's very unique and clear and really cuts through is becoming more of a difficult thing to do. And I think in a way, there's this opportunity because now you have AI generated content, AI generated videos and everything. So I think that the people who actually now create their own videos, write their own writing and everything, have a lot more of an advantage. And I'm wondering also something that you've talked about, with me is that something like curiosity is an aspect that can compound, right? And I'm wondering, on one side, when you're an investor, a lot of people will look to you to be the smartest person in the world. So I'm wondering, how do you use curiosity yourself as an investor as an advantage, when you're dealing with entrepreneurs and just in terms of how you do your day to day?
If you're a CEO of a MedTech company and you just got ghosted by another investor this week, or maybe a strategic that you're trying to have a meeting with just kind of brushed you off at a conference, and you're just sick and tired of all this, you want to make these people pretty much eat their words, right? I think I have something for you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most MedTech startups don't fail because of product. And trust me, I can confidently say this after interviewing so many different startups on the show, investors, strategics. A lot of them fail because the market never really formed around them. My obsession with technology adoption and, more importantly, market engineering has sort of taken shape over the years into my business called MarketCraft and recruiting a top tier team around me for that. And MarketCraft, we're not just about digital marketing and campaigns and everything. We focus on engineering markets. We use AI trained models, psychology, persuasion, and strategic storytelling to manufacture something that every single CEO needs. And that's leverage. We want to give you leverage with the market. So by creating magnetic messaging and attention, we can shape a belief system that is going to attract and magnetize those early clinical adopters to you. We want to give you leverage with investors because when your category narrative is very clear and your demand signals are loud and you can show this early clinical pipeline, and then at that point, capital start to chase you instead of the other way around. Now you have options. And then leverage with strategics. Because look, when you show a strategic, and trust me, I've had many conversations with them on this podcast and offline. When you show them that you're starting to own momentum in a space that they care about, you don't just look like a startup to them anymore. Now you look more like a partner. And if you do it really well, potentially competition they need to take out, right? So if you're an early stage MedTech CEO and this all resonated with you, I want you to stop what you're doing, put pause on this podcast, go to growmymedtech.com. That's GROW, growmymedtech.com. I want you to book time with me. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a market analysis for you. I'm going to come to the table with 2 to 3 really good ideas. There's not a guarantee that you guys might be a fit for us. It could be the wrong time, a lot of things like that. We turn away more companies than we take on, but I can guarantee you that you're going to walk away with 2 or 3 really good ideas for free, and it's going to be a good conversation. So go to growmymedtech.com. I'm really looking forward to talking with you, and more importantly, you can feel free to vent to me about all the problems that you're having, because at MarketCraft, we want to come and solve those for you immediately. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. So I'm definitely not the smartest person in the world at anything that I know of. But and I think both are kind of related. Curiosity it's important, especially because there's a lot of things that I do not know about. And so, for me, something like a healthcare expert, it really cannot exist in a sense. The world is so complex that to be a healthcare expert would mean to be an expert in absolutely all the different subsectors of healthcare, and within those subsectors, every different detail that one could know about. This is like being an expert in medicine. Well, I mean, not really. Probably you have a broad knowledge about healthcare or about medicine, but then you probably have your specialty, and at most you may be an expert in your specialty. Like that happens, across all domains. I believe doesn't matter what we talk about, but being an expert in something, it's getting more and more complicated as the world expands in complexity. And so being curious is really necessary to just be on top of things. Whatever you do, whatever your work field is, if you do not have curiosity, you may have a skill set that may be repeatable. But I think a curious individual can go much, much farther, right? And just to link it back with being an investor, I'm talking to founders every week that they absolutely have more specialized knowledge than I do in their specific field. I don't know whether they do or not in healthcare, but in any case, I'm definitely talking with someone that knows more than me about the conversation that we're having. It's absolutely necessary that I stay curious to try to get up to speed with him or with her as fast as possible. So that's I think a bit how I think about it.
When you're speaking with founders, a lot of times, especially in our industry, the typical founder is usually like a scientist or an inventor. And so they have this issue sometimes of really like falling in love with a product. And you sort of noted that one of the most important aspects in MedTech is distribution. And that's, pretty much where they live or die. And I completely agree. I think that's why more than ever, I think many years ago, you can come up with a really good clinical product, get through FDA, get a little traction and get acquired. Now having much stronger signals of distribution is more important. Companies don't want to take that risk anymore. So I'm wondering, like, as now like a growth investor, your perspective on the gap between, let's say, a great like clinical tool or platform and like a great business, and how do you differentiate the two?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe Omar, I'm gonna just use 1 minute to talk about Sofina, which then I can
please
what I do today. But basically, Sofina is a investment firm based in Europe, but investing across the whole world. And you define me as a growth equity investor. That is correct, and that's what we do at Sofina. So we have 4 offices: one in Luxembourg, one in Brussels, one in London, and one in Singapore. And we will cover the whole world basically, but mostly the US, Europe, and Asia. And so we manage approximately 10 billion euros in assets. And then those assets will be invested with 2 main strategies. But, part of it is invested in funds, but the other part, which is most relevant to our conversation today, is invested in direct growth equity investments. And I'm part of the, as you properly said, the healthcare and the MedTech team. And we have 2 strategies. We have early growth and we have late stage minority investments, which will be like more scaled, profitable companies. The early growth will be revenue generating, but loss making companies. at the time of the investment. So sorry for that background, but I think that helps connect now with how I think about a great business versus a great clinical product, but that is not a great business yet. But we focus on commercial stage companies, and I always say when I talk with different founders that I'm not sure that is the only great strategy to invest in medtech. A lot of great investors investing at the earlier stages, preclinical, clinical. But at Sofina, the minimum investments that we make are 20 million approximately. So when we invest 20 million in a company, generally, unless it's in a very hot space, we're looking at early commercial stage companies. And I think, the main difference between a great clinical product and a great business is whether the team can reach distribution efficiency. I mean, that is what is mostly...
What do you mean by that, by distribution efficiency?
Yeah, so to me, distribution efficiency is that the company is going to be able to, at some point, make money selling their own products. Basically, that at some point in the life of the company, it reaches a volume where the company can actually, pay all their commercial team, pay all their operations, and make a profitable business. And that is very tough.
And they have essentially good EBITDA, right?
It can have EBITDA. It can be an EBITDA positive company. But that, in the medical device industry, is extremely complex. And
very.
We can go into explaining why, but basically, it's the healthcare industry is very complicated, and selling to providers, it's very, very complicated. And doing it at scale while making money with a single product portfolio, it's tough. It's very tough.
It's funny you say that too, because this is one of the things that I believe is that if you look at right now, every medtech company is built to either stay private, go public, and then get acquired, or just get acquired, right? Like that's just how this game works, and it's too difficult to really go on your own, right? So that being said, I feel like aside from really having great distribution, when you get acquired as a company, aside from your product and stuff, a lot of it is essentially, I think, commercial assets. And I think one of those commercial assets that a company needs to think about from now is having a really robust CRM that's full of leads and deals, et cetera, and relationships. Because I think part of it is, as an acquirer, one is to look at something that hey, this can go into our product portfolio and it strengthens our relationships with customers. The other side is how do we extend our footprint? And I feel like if a startup comes and part of that valuation process, hey, here's our CRM, here's the deals that we have, here's the leads and everything. And now that allows that larger company to get a foothold to go into accounts that they're not normally in. I feel like that is a very powerful asset. And something that's worth considering versus I think a lot of medtech companies are still behind on catching up with that thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. To be honest, I don't think much about companies being acquired. And the reason for that is because we look for those companies that can actually go on their own. That is, the number one investment criteria for me, and what makes my work hard and easy at times, because it's looking for those companies that could remain independent as long as they want to, so that they could reach commercial efficiency.
Can you explain for the audience who's new to, they're not investors, how and why that works out? Because the average person, when you think about investors, investors, any fund, they take money from LPs, they're expected to make a multiple on that. And so the idea is that the money goes out, you want it to come back in a short amount of time and to come back with more money. And so if you invest in a company that can go alone for a long time, right? And let's just say the company stays private, they decide not to go get public. Can you expand a little bit on that and educate educate people?
And actually, now thank you for opening it like that because I missed something very important about Sofina. At Sofina, we do not manage anyone else's money. So we manage our own assets. And, we're listed. And so we have some investors, but it's not like most investment firms where there are LPs and there's a GP. So LP will be a limited partner that will put money into the different funds. The GP will be the general partner that will manage those funds and invest in different companies. At Sofina, we manage our own balance sheet. So we will invest the capital that we have in the balance sheet, and then we will reinvest the proceeds of successful investments. The reason why I can say confidently that the objective for me would be to find great companies that can decide to remain independent for as long as they want is because we have a relatively longer holding period than other investment firms. That is because we do not have to return that capital to our LPs like most other investment firms have to based on the bylaws of their funds, which most likely have a 10 to 12 year investment and divestment period. And so for Sofina, if a company can continue creating value and compounding for many years, we are happy to remain invested and remain partners to that company for as long as possible until it doesn't make sense for whichever reason. There's many reasons for an investor to get out of a company that are not necessarily related to having to get liquidity, but maybe there's a transition in the company, or maybe the founder that we invested in wants to retire and there's a private equity firm that wants to take over. Maybe they want to go on an IPO at some point to generate some liquidity for themselves. We're very happy to facilitate that as well. But we like to think of ourselves as long-term investors because we don't have those constraints that other investors may have. And to your point, there's a lot of investors in the MedTech and the medical device investment world that will be looking for great companies that will be perfect portfolio additions to some of the larger strategics. And that is a very reasonable investment strategy, and it opens the door for many great founders and companies out there. But we do prefer those companies that can remain independent, and they may be acquired. For example, we invested in Organox some time ago, and it was a very successful acquisition by Terumo. It was a little bit of a bittersweet moment. It was a great outcome for us, a great outcome for the company, great outcome for everyone. But also, we would have loved to stay, with the company for a very long time.
Yeah, and I personally, I do want to see more. Like, I'm waiting to see who could potentially be the next Intuitive. So Intuitive is a robotics company, but they have the second. I mean, if you consider Abbott is a med device company, but it's also a biotech company. But technically, if you take Abbott out of it, Intuitive is the largest medical device company in the world by market cap, and they technically have 3 or 4 products technically. There's some tools and stuff. But there's a huge comparison to Medtronic and Stryker and stuff. And I think it's really exciting to see companies like Intuitive. And I'm hoping that. I think if there's a company that could be the next, I don't know if it's at the same market cap, but I think iRhythm, who has essentially a platform for arrhythmias and everything, I think that's a good example of a company that can go on its own. But I do want to start seeing, I don't want to see, we just went through this the last 10 years of all this consolidation in MedTech. These companies got super bloated and now they're all spinning out their divisions and stuff, and so I don't want us to have gone through all that and only to go back to 5-10 years. We just end up with all this consolidation.
Yeah, nope. Look, I have no clue of what's going to happen, but it does seem like some of these larger companies are divesting some of their business units, potentially because those business units do not have the growth that the public market may expect of those companies, and thus they divested. And I'm sure they will be acquiring fast-growing companies like the one that you and I are used to seeing, which is at the end of the day what can increase their growth profile and thus the valuations in the public markets. I mean, it's a little bit of a wheel, right? And at some point they may have other other business units that are not growing or performing as well, and they may divest it. And other private equity players may take over them, or and try to optimize and make them more efficient. I think at the end of the day, anything that means a higher competitive landscape, it should benefit the final patient through improved pricing. So I think it's a natural cycle. A lot of great industries will get acquired. Some non-performing business units will get out of the larger strategics, and hopefully they become more efficient business units and as a standalone company.
Yeah. I think the other side for our industry is that, at least what we're trying to help solve for in this show is that we have like two big problems. One is capital, and so we need to attract like more capital into the space. I'm currently, so I got back to writing again. I wrote a article on mini strategics a few weeks ago, and now I'm currently writing an article about bubbles in industries and why
Where do you write?
So I write, I publish on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And so on LinkedIn, and also I'm starting to publish on X, but like the main place I've published on has always been on LinkedIn articles. I do have a Medium blog, by the way, which I should get back to publishing on there as well. But I think going back to, so capital is one issue we have, right now. A lot of founders are running into the same issues, kind of dealing with the stereotypical medical device investor. And so I kind of hope that through this show, more family offices, more investors in deep tech and everything start making their way into healthcare. The other side of it that not a lot of people talk about is talent. If you go out to Silicon Valley, the smartest people coming out of university and stuff, they're not going into MedTech. And so we have to solve for that. So I think finding a way to bring in more capital into the industry, and then also talent is going to be really important. And I personally, I'm kind of concerned about our industry because we've had this huge sort of generational shift that's happening right now with AI. And I don't think our industry is really taking it seriously, if that makes sense. I don't see Medtronic or these companies really figuring out how do they restructure their businesses in using AI. And I worry that the industry's gonna get left behind as a whole, And so those are the other things I often think about.
Yeah. On capital, I agree with you to an extent in sense that we think capital, it's better to look at it from how much capital there is for the size of the industry, right?
That's fair. So what would you put the total market cap of all med device?
I have no clue. I cannot.
I can give you a number. So I need to look this up again. But the last time I checked, if you took everything in our industry, it's 400 or 500 billion.
Okay.
And so if
which is still relatively okay. It's not so bad. It's 10% of the annual expenditure on healthcare in the US? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think pharma and biotech are sometimes put together and separate, but pharma by itself is I think 2 trillion. I need to look this up. I should look this up and make a post about this, but
yes, actually, you know what? We could work on that one together. Sizing the industry,
the entire industry. Yeah, we should, but I don't know. I mean, I think we just need more money. I think so. Here's my argument about why we need more money. We need a bubble in the industry. And if you think about a bubble, the dot-com bubble is a great example. A bunch of money went into dot-com companies, the infrastructure and everything. And a lot of things failed. But then at the same time, we had things like fiber optics that were laid out that gave birth to a lot of streaming and social media and stuff. And I think when you look like you disagree with me. I want to hear your point, but here's my thing. When you have a lot of money coming in, you have a higher chance that there are going to be some companies that are going to just take some wild moonshot. Which industry is it has sort of a bubble, and there's some wild stuff happening, like BCI, no problem with that. And I think partly because you have Neuralink that just really set the standard of like these crazy valuations. But like, there's so many different areas of med device that they don't even have like digital components, but they can end up with like innovations that make huge differences in patient care.
Yeah,
but money's not going into them, you know?
Yeah, so a couple points that you mentioned. I fully agree that bubbles are great for the final consumer.
We gotta make bubbles great again.
we gotta make bubbles. And you know, I fully agree with that. I will not go into what I believe is a bubble or not, because I just don't want to make statements that I'm not sure about. But I think that a bubble in the MedTech industry would definitely be great. I think that there have been certain companies that have been treated as if there was a bubble in the past in our industry.
Can you think of any? Can you give any examples?
Yes, but I won't.
Oh, come on.
No, I won't. No, I won't because I won't because I don't want to go into, again, I don't think that the ability to fundraise very well and convince I mean, I'm not going to shame any companies, because then we won't have bubbles, and what we want are bubbles, right?
Okay, that's fair. All right, you got me on that one.
All right. So, and by the way, I'm not saying that's anything wrong, and we all make mistakes as investors, and there's some companies that raise at extremely high valuations, and then they grow into those valuations, and that is great. And I think it's hard for it to happen in the medical device space, because it is quite a pragmatic industry, and it is kind of hard to. I mean, it is hard to sell a narrative when there is so many regulatory backstops, in a sense. So, like, you can sell a huge narrative, but it's very easy to see why it's going to be extremely hard to reach the scale that you may be thinking of. It's going to be extremely hard from a regulatory standpoint to capture or touch all the applications that you have for your platform technology. And even if you achieve to do so, good luck commercializing. But I fully agree with you. And I think, on the other end, again, BCI, yes, I think, there's been a lot of capital raised. Then there's other companies that have been extremely more capital efficient, like Carolina at InBrain. I mean, she's doing amazing things in the...
Huge fan of Carolina. And that's such a cool company. I think InBrain's really fascinating, because it's one of many companies, I think, where they're going to have like innovation around material sciences, which I think is cool. Like, so for those who don't know, InBrain, their approach on BCI is the use of graphene. You can look up Carolina's episode on the podcast. Just go to Spotify or YouTube and just type in InBrain, understand MedTech, will pop up. But anyway, please continue.
Yeah, no, but I was just going to say that I think in order to get bubbles, especially in the medical device space, you need to go for things that are completely revolutionary. Honestly, I don't think that a lot of people are going to be willing to get brain implants for consumer applications. I mean, I think, and it's already happening for clinical applications, going into consumer applications, I don't know. But if it were to happen, some of these companies are out there building for that, for a future, which I think it's hard to get there. But if we get there, it's a completely different future. Then, I think within robotics, it's happened the same in our industry. I mean, there's been companies that have raised a lot of capital. Distribution is extremely complex in robotics, or with everything that has a high capex price. But like there's been people there. Then there's other companies, for non-invasive oncology surgery. So, that have raised a lot of money and have an extremely novel approach. Ultrasound, has been something that is going around. I could be, for example, and the brain, everything related to the brain. If there's something that it's really groundbreaking and it allows us to treat diseases like they have not been treated until now, with different energy waves, with that could be a massive thing, right? And I think there will be a bubble there, and some companies will come out of there, and some others will not. But I agree with you. It's great if there's not capital, probably those companies are never created. So I don't know. I will be very careful of investing in bubbles, but I really hope that a lot of capital flows into.
Yeah, well, on the other side, like on X at least, if it's not political or some trending story, a lot of discussions are going around like healthcare and medicine. And so recently, a couple of things that were interesting. And again, the more Elon Musk talks about it, the better, I think. So like one was the talk of the use of MRIs for preventative scans and everything. So Pronuvo was brought up, and there's this whole like trending topic around it. I'm getting the CMO of Pronuva and also another physician on to talk about the use of MRIs. The other side was, I'll actually pull up the clip. Do you see what Elon said recently about surgery?
Yeah.
About the humanoid. Here, I'm gonna pull it up just for the audience who hasn't seen it yet. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull it up so we can look and react at it. Hold on. All right, here we go. I found it. Let me pull it up on screen for everybody, so we can, just for context. I think it's fun to do this. Like, it makes it more like the Joe Rogan show. We're just going to look at things and react. Okay, so here's this interview that he was doing on Peter Diamandis's show Moonshots.
There's a shortage of doctors and great surgeons. You're a doctor yourself. Yes. You know how that it takes a long time for a human to become
ridiculously expensive and long.
Ridiculously, a super long time to learn to be a good doctor. And even then, the knowledge is constantly evolving. It's hard to keep up with everything. Doctors have limited time. They make mistakes. And you say, like, how many great surgeons are there? Not that many great surgeons.
When do you think Optimus will be a better surgeon than the best surgeons? How long for that?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. Yeah. And by the way, that's
3 years. 3 years at scale.
Yes.
There'll probably be more Optimus robots that are great surgeons than there are all surgeons on Earth.
And the cost of that is the CapEx and electricity, and
really interesting perspective. I mean, what do you think about that? I have my own opinion about it, but I'm wondering, like, when you hear something like that, what do you think?
Look, I am not a surgeon myself, so I don't get emotional about this. Of course, when people say that there's going to be no investors in the next 5 years because AI is going to take everybody's job, maybe there I react a little bit more emotionally. Here, I try to react very rationally. First of all, I think his take on robots entering the OR, I think Mr. Musk has not been exposed to the regulatory burden of our healthcare industry. So there's no chance that a robot is running a fully autonomous surgery. We're talking about humanoid robots, right? So doing this stuff, it's going to take a very long time until they are enabled to get into the OR and to have any kind of independence over what happens to a patient. And I think that's for the good, by the way. I do hope that humanoid robots get great and make the jobs of surgeons easier. I'm not sure how, and I do agree that there is a shortage of surgeons, full stop. I'm not going to get into great surgeons or not great surgeons. There's just a shortage of surgeons. But I think on this one, I think he's wrong. And by the way, I think that when, AI is best, or at least the view that I have is that AI is best when there's a reasonably low amount of uncertainty involved, right? Well, in the OR, I am not a surgeon myself, but talking about surgeons, there is a high degree of uncertainty. Things can move around fast. There needs to be someone active and knowledgeable about what is best for the patient at any given time. And I would honestly feel much more comfortable in the hands of a surgeon than of a humanoid robot that knows A, B, C, and this is what I have to do. And if this happens, this is what I have to do, but is not able to see the nuance in the situation. So again, do we need more surgeons? Yes. Do I think that this is going to get more and more aggravated because maybe, there's less people going into medicine, going into surgery than we would need? Yes. Do I think that the robots are going to be in the OR anytime soon? The fully humanoid robots? No.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a couple of things about this. Is like, one is he's when you look at it less about surgeons and more like in context of that, couple of factors are at play right now. One is that if you look at Moore's law, which said that every year, I think, every year you double the number of transistors on a computer chip, right? And so at its peak, Moore's law was operating at like 1.8x. Now Moore's law is like 15, 20, 30x. It's like out of control. And you're having this like exponential growth and innovation because the next phase of innovations is coming like earlier and earlier and earlier. Like it feels like just a few months ago, we had like one level of innovation with AI and LLMs, and now we're at another level. And so I think when you look at surgery as a training issue, where like as a surgeon, like imagine you need like life-saving surgery. The first thing you think about is like, which surgeon has had the most experience? And I think this is where like robotics helps a lot. We already have like robotics in the operating room assisting for certain areas, right? And I think that's where you really democratize surgery. I agree with you though. I don't think we're going to be seeing Optimus robots. And this is where I think tech does not understand healthcare very well. This is why I believe indirectly, like when Amazon, who was it? Amazon, JP Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway all teamed up, I think 8 years ago to like change healthcare. And then they shut that down in 2 years because it's hard. Like think of it like this, just in the US, this is not to mention the rest of the world, just in the United States, on one side, we have ORs where the surgeon is using robotics in the OR for a procedure. And then that same hospital functions by using fax and paper. Like, you know what I mean? So like there's this weird dynamic that exists in hospitals. So like the fact that we'll see Optimus robots in the OR in the next 3 years, I don't think so. I think it will happen over time though, maybe sooner than we think, that you have robots in the procedure helping with like a very specific part of the procedure or the whole thing. And then human beings are able to be there to provide like guidance on the creative side, because like not every patient is the same. And so as a surgeon, you might be dealing with a patient, something's different about this patient than somebody else. And then you have to come up with sort of a more creative solution within the OR to take care of it.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't know that a humanoid robot is a great form factor to support a patient in the OR table.
Right. And I agree with you. I have a thought on this, but tell me when you mention the form factor, why? Like, can you tell me specifically what you're thinking about?
Well, I mean, if I think what the next step in robotics may be coming to the OR, I feel like autonomous navigation through endoscopes, like to guide itself through the body to the point that it needs to get to, autonomous extraction and suturing versus the doctor having to do it, of the existing machines that we have today, right? Of the robots that are already in the OR. I honestly don't know how a humanoid robot. I mean, I don't think that they have they would have to have the dexterity to do everything manually.
Oh, yeah.
Or to navigate and to use the existing tools in the OR. And if a new tool were to come in, so a newer medical device that it's better than the ones that the surgeons are using today, you have to retrain the robot with those tools. It's just, right. It doesn't like.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to take the position of my late mentor who unfortunately he passed away last week, Scott Adams, where he kind of made this observation about like humanoid robots, which is whenever you see the videos of these humanoid robots, they're doing something, but like if you make them do the full thing, they're not very good at. Like, for example, it'll show like a robot playing tennis, but it's like, okay, show the robot playing a full match, and it's like a completely different situation, or like folding laundry and everything. So I think I completely agree, and I agree on the form factor side, because like one of the most difficult things is reproducing how hands work. So like there's a company called Psionic that they make bionic hands for people, but like one of the things they're solving for is to create these bionic hands that are going to be very useful for like humanoid robots. It's very, very difficult. And you brought up another good point I didn't think about, is like the moment a new medical device gets introduced, you got to retrain the robot and everything. So there's all these like in the world of perfect surgery, is the form factor like a robot that looks and is designed like a human with hands and everything doing the surgery? Like probably not.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I mean, why would we, if we have the technology and the technical ability with AI to make autonomous navigation of the existing robotic systems, why would we need like something that looks like a human, does not have the agility of a human, does not think like a it's just that I mean I see how Elon Musk in this case, which by the way, I mean, he's done great things, and I really like how he's always pushing technology, and
I wouldn't bet against him. But in this case, like there's more nuance to it. Like let's pretend for a second, just for as a thought experiment, that humanoid, that Optimus robot that can do, let's just say a appendectomy perfectly from the start to the finish of the case. Let's say that which tools and devices, it's all that's just taken care of. Being a surgeon is not just going into surgery. The other side of it is actually dealing with the family, walking the patient through. There's all these other factors that are involved that complicate it. But I think I think something both you and I can agree is the use of robotics in procedures, like something that I would love to see across all procedures is like LASIK surgery, which I should get. I was taking out my contact earlier because it was bothering me. That's why I was like, messing around with my eye. I'm like, I'm probably freaking Diego out. But like, you go to get LASIK surgery. One is it's gotten so cheap that I can just go to some like strip mall here in California and get it done for $1,000. And the other side is that the technology has gotten so good that there's like no variability. Like it's all automated. It's robotic to an extent. And so if I go to get LASIK surgery, I'm not necessarily thinking of like, who's done it the most times. I just think like, okay, conveniently for me, which center is closest to me to get. And I think that's where like robotics can be a factor. But again, like there's this whole thing that's happening in tech about all these great applications and the reality of like how behind healthcare is.
Yeah, but I mean to a certain extent, I like there's amazing, especially within the medical device industry, like we are able to manipulate the body in amazing ways, right? I mean, medical devices get where drugs don't get. Sometimes you need to fix a human, you need to fix it anatomically, but there's no drugs for solving certain things that medical devices and surgery are solving for. So I think that, trying to think that you're going to solve for the part of medicine, which is like the last resort for patients. So it's the complicated of the complicated, right? It's the understanding of the human body. And there's not something that fits all, right? So the reason why I think healthcare and medical devices do not evolve at the pace of other industries is that there's not a one size fits all. For example, in software, AI can be applied across the board, right? I mean, and it's AI, so computer or basically a computer native dealing with software, computer native. But in healthcare, you have to understand the body, which we don't fully understand yet. You need to give an answer to the answer of does everybody work the same? Which I think honestly, like, precision medicine is a thing, and I do think that different bodies react differently to different things. AI cannot fit all for now. And I think it will evolve and we will do great things with it, hopefully. But it's going to be more nuanced, and it probably will evolve a little bit slower than in our industries.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I hope, I mean, look, I just want to see more people talk about MedTech. By the way, you kind of gave me an idea for something. I don't know if this something like this exists, but like, we've seen a lot of money go into AI for drug discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a company out there that has like AI for like device discovery. You know what I mean?
Device discovery, yeah. But what?
I mean, maybe that might be a terrible idea, but it just kind of dawned on me because like, there's all kinds of areas of medicine that need improvements through devices, and some of which don't have to be super high tech devices. You know, I don't know. Could be a bad idea.
No, but I think that I think if someone, I've played with it in the past. If someone wants to play with it, it probably would be what are certain conditions that are not well served by the existing drugs, and what are certain things that drugs are not great for solving. Now, are those conditions mechanical in any shape or form? Can we do something in the body to fix them? I guess it's a different thing, but it's AI for looking for ideas of what to solve with medical devices.
Well, and also part of drugs, what people don't actually understand is that the reason why you have side effects when you take any medication is because medication doesn't have like a GPS device to just go to one place in your body. It just goes everywhere. And so drug delivery is one side. This is where I feel our industry is going to get more funding and really interesting partnerships, is because pharma companies are going to look for better like drug delivery. Yeah. And then the other side of it is, even with GLP-1s, which is becoming like such a huge craze as a miracle drug and all these different things, still a lot of people, there's a big portion of the population that are anti being on medication for life. And so I think this is where there's this opportunity for hopefully medical devices. Like we're seeing also already medical devices in the metabolic area, companies like Aqua Medical, that they're using endoscopy to essentially ablate certain parts of the small intestine and essentially replicate the effects of gastric bypass on lowering A1C. So I think a lot of people would prefer, even if they had to do something like, again, I'm not talking about aqua, I'm just talking about like, imagine a device intervention that solves for or cures a disease. If like, I'll give you, actually, this is a great example. I'm a patient. So I have some high lipids, genetically, right? Lipoprotein A is one of those things. There are some drugs that can help with that, but there's really nothing there. But there's apparently a procedure that's kind of like ECMO that essentially cycles and filters your blood and removes lipoprotein A. Me as a patient, if I was given options where it's like, hey, either once a year you're going to go and get this blood filtering procedure done for your lipoprotein A, or you take this medication every day, I'll go with the procedure every single day. I'm hoping that there'll be more devices and mechanical interventions like that give people an option. Yeah.
No, I think it will happen. And by the way, some things like continuous monitoring, right? Look, I don't know what is going to be the direction, but the only way to have fully personalized healthcare is through continuous monitoring. Like there's no way to monitor continuously without medical devices. And today we do it very well for glucose, right? Which has been one of the most successful medical devices in the industry, continuous glucose monitoring sensors. But I think in the future we'll do it for other molecules in the body, and that will be huge game changer, I believe. There's many applications of medical devices that you need an analog device in order to achieve certain things. And so I think there's, I know you're a little bit worried, but I think there's a great future for this industry that we are lucky to be in.
I agree. I mean, I have my concerns and stuff, but I think there's also a lot of excitement. I mean, I always tell people, all these major companies in the world, the largest companies on planet are Tesla, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, they all have a fiduciary to grow. And Apple's not going to have a board meeting this month and say, hey guys, guess what we're going to go into? We're going to go into furniture. At this point, what's left is like the thing that a lot of companies spend the majority of their GDP on, which is like healthcare. I think the two things that are left at this point, healthcare and military, right? And I think that for the most part, a lot of these companies are going to be leaning more towards the healthcare side. And so I think that brings in a lot of like talent and investment, and a lot of like, what's that?
I definitely hope so. They
Yeah.
choose healthcare over military, but
Yeah. Well, not to get political while we're on the topic. So like, I do believe that it, like, I'm very anti, I don't like going to war. And, the US has done, like, we've gotten to a lot of like meaningless wars that we just don't need to. But I think being a world power, I think it is very important to have advanced military intelligence, because if you're trying to negotiate with unfriendly countries or dictators, it helps to know, for them to know that like this country also has like the most advanced military. Like you can't,
yes, I think there's something, there's a saying out there that I really like, but I may say it wrong, which is you cannot say you're peaceful if you wouldn't have the opportunity to be dangerous.
Oh yeah, I love that. Oh, that's true. 100%.
And I think it's a great saying, but that, I am very against the being noisy to demonstrate that you could be dangerous. I think, people who know, and I am of the, I think that, again, I agree with you that, of course, it's not that the leading countries in the world should not be powerful. But I do think that if those companies decide to do something, I would rather see them, using some of the
totally
into healthcare than defense. That's my only point. But because there's a lot of companies that are heavy into defense that we don't see on the day to day. So I think there's quite some deployed there.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely, and I think like I don't know, government funded programs like DARPA, for example. Like there's been a lot of like really great innovations that came out of, well, like I mean, robotics, surgical robotics, kind of came out of a DARPA program, I believe. So it's good. Diego, like as we kind of wrap up, and again, I really appreciative of you coming on the show. We'll definitely have to have you back on. I'm trying to do like more fun water cooler episodes where just like covering topics and it's talking, right? I think a lot of people want. I think part of the draw of podcasts like Joe Rogan and stuff is like you get to kind of sit in and listen to like two or a few people like talk about really interesting things, just like you're hanging out. And I think this is part of that. But like we just saw each other at in JP Morgan, but at the LSI event. Right. And I noticed you like, we're speaking with a lot of founders and stuff. And so you have a very unique philosophy about having, about not being extractive as an investor and earning the right with entrepreneurs and founders. And you have a very, like, I really like your philosophy about like networking and developing relationships. Can you kind of like expand a little bit on that?
Yeah. So I think in general, building relationships, it's a long-term game. I think, and I think you need to be candid, but also, I think you don't always need to be in a commercial state of mind, in the sense that, when you are talking to someone, there's two things that we can be doing, right? I can be right here, right now, trying to sell something for which I'm not prepared, by the way. I'm not prepared to come here and sell something to the audience. Or I can try to be personal and maintain an enjoyable discussion with you with my commercial mindset turned off, or at least not being in the front, right? And I think that's very important, because people enjoy genuine relationships. It's not like, we are very busy people. I think I think it's enough the amount of work that we put on the day-to-day for not actually being able to develop long-term relationships. And by the way, this is the case between you and I. I don't think that we have ever been able to talk in commercial terms or work.
No, it's purely based on just
work directly together. But I like you. I think you like me. And if in the future,
like you.
If in the future there's a potential to do something together, we are in a very much spot to work together. And then the second one is that I think when you put yourself in front of others and you're actually with a commercial mindset, I think you need to come prepared to that situation. And this probably is advice for the younger generations out there. And because I guess that the older generations have it in mind already, but you don't get a lot of shots for closing a sale. And, a sale does not close out of accident. And when I say a sale, I'm not a salesman, but I'm talking about an investment opportunity as well, right? So when I'm in front of a founder, when I'm in front of another investor that I may want to collaborate with, I try to come as ready as possible for the conversation, so that I don't need to convince them of anything before I've convinced myself that I would be the right partner for that person. I don't know if that makes sense or it's...
No, it makes a lot of sense. And again, like, I think, in a different way, this is kind of like at MarketCraft, what we do is similar in the sense that, I have to constantly find new clients to grow our business and everything. But that's also why I speak to a lot of people. We run a commercial on our podcast, so that way founders book time. A lot of times those founders haven't raised any money. I get on and provide value and develop that relationship. So that way, when the time is right to do business, like they have us in mind, they come back and do it. Versus if I only go after people when right at the time that they need somebody like us, then it's all about just trying to close a deal. Yeah. And when you're focused purely on transaction, there's a lot of nuance in terms of value creation that's lost. And then that's kind of like how the whole relationship evolves, because that's essentially the way the relationship was developed and nurtured, right? And so for some businesses, that's okay. That's not the business that I want to run. Versus the other side of it, which is more of a relationship based. There's founders that I gave advice to and helped pro bono over a year ago, and that's just now turning into business. And as a result of that, right, since the relationship started based on like value creation and not transactional, they're also not transactional with me in the sense that like not everything's going to be perfect. Sometimes some things will go well, some strategies won't. And so they're a little bit more leaning on that end, but at the same time, they want to help me. And so they're more willing to like make introductions and keep us in mind, right? I'll give a shout out to Ann Ostuit. Moon Surgical was our very first client. This is like back when I had like one employee. And like to this day, that was 2 years ago. I mean, every French company, we've helped a lot of French companies. Every French company that's come to us has been like, oh yeah, Ann Ostuit talked about you. Yep. Right? And so I think there's something to be said about that. Like, I think these days there's too much, because of social media, I think there's been a lot of emphasis on transactional relationship and extractive relationships. And it's just not the world that I want to operate in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's a world for the people that enjoy that landscape. But again,
I think they call it private equity.
What?
I was like, I love all the PE people listening. I love you. I got love for you guys.
In a way, Sofina is considered private equity as well. So, but
well, no, yes, but you guys are using your own money. You guys are different, and the fact that you have these like longer horizons and you're willing to see things, then you're making the decisions you're making are very different.
I don't want to kill the joke, and the defense mechanism for myself is we are only minority investors. So and this is important, by the way, and maybe it's a good thing to close off. When I'm out there as an investor, we're really trying to find the best founders or managing teams in the industry that we can trust that they can take their company all the way if that's the best thing for the company. And we will never involve ourselves operationally because we don't have the skill set to do so. We will connect the company to the right people, we will help, from a capital building, capital formation, and governance perspective, but that's kind of the extent of it. That's why we're not included in your job.
No, but so I like that. Let me touch on this. We can go on for another hour about this. We got to wrap up, but this is why, I'll have you back and I'll have to have somebody else on this. So I noticed something in our industry. I was actually talking to Henry Peck about this, that our industry is not very founder friendly. And because if you think about the average founder in our industry, usually it's an inventor or scientist. The moment of your stereotypical medical device investor invests in a company, they do everything to just move that founder into like a CTO role or move them out of the company and then install like a CEO that has the experience in med device. And I kind of want to get away from that. There's some great like first-time founders in our industry where as they raise money, the worst thing that I think a board can do is to say, oh, this person doesn't have that kind of experience. Like we should put one of our people that we know have had experience as a CEO. And I think we need to get away from that.
Yeah, I don't have a very strong take on it, but what I can tell you is that we will back the companies in which we are extremely confident about either the founder CEO or whomever is the CEO at the time that we come in. If we are not confident and that is the right person to take the company all the way, it's not a deal for us. It's not an opportunity for us. It's not something that we'll be investing in. But again, it's not to say that we're better than others, but this is just our philosophy, our mindset. We invest in people and we invest in relationships. And if we don't trust whomever is at the helm of that company, or in fact, the whole management team, the whole team, we won't be investing in that company. So
no, I love that. I mean, look, I'm not, I'm not somebody who's like writing multi-million-dollar checks and managing like billions of dollars of portfolio value. But I think there's something to be said as a fund or investor. If you find a company and you're like, oh yeah, really good market, great product, don't like the CEO or founder. So like, let's invest in this company. Once we're in, we're going to change the leadership and install a new one. And doing that is going to put the company in the best position to succeed. Like, I don't think that's usually how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. Anyways, I like to think, or I think there's more good players than bad players in our industry, and there will be some bad players, but I think, again, changing management, it doesn't necessarily have to be a drama if it's properly structured and if everyone is aligned. It would be a tough position for us because we're not in charge of that. That's not what we do. That's not who we are. But again, I do agree with you. I think, and I hope that more founders decide to go, all the way and become CEOs of their companies and build up their skill set if they need to build it up, to be hopefully, CEOs of large companies that they've built. But that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, look, Diego, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast. Quick shout out for those who are listening, because he listened to me and he took action. Go check out Diego's newsletter. You can go to openentropy.com and check it out. So now I just want to put pressure on him so that he can start putting out more great articles and stuff. So I'm looking forward to following along, man. I think I already signed up as well. So
I'll have to write something of value for people here.
You will, man. I read your past. Yeah, I read some of your previous articles. And I thought they were great. So, but look, Diego, I'm grateful for you as a friend and as somebody who's in the industry. We got to retain, you're a young, talented guy. You could have gone to any industry. So I'm so happy that you're here in MedTech.
Thank you, Omar. It's been a blast.
Awesome.
Great.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
You can't replace part of the brain.
You treat them the same.
Source of truth for the MedTech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
#1 show in the MedTech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.